March 1944. The jungles of Bougainville have become a slaughterhouse. In the past 3 weeks alone, 147 American Marines have been killed by bullets they never saw coming. Shot through the head while eating breakfast. Shot through the throat while writing letters home. Shot through the eye while relieving themselves behind a tree. The killers. Japanese snipers. Invisible. Patient. Deadly. Hidden so perfectly in the jungle canopy that entire platoons walked directly beneath them without knowing death watched from above. The Marine Corps has no answer. No counter-sniper program. No specialized training. No solution. And then there was Robert Leakey, a deer hunter from Pennsylvania. A man who had never seen combat before, 1943. A nobody who carried a rifle. His own squadmates called a joke, a weapon ordered from a mail-order catalog, assembled with spare parts, and mounted with a civilian hunting scope that cost him 3 months of military pay. They laughed at him, called him mailbox behind his back. His platoon sergeant told him to his face that carrying that ridiculous contraption into battle was suicidal. But here is what nobody expected. By the time the Bougainville campaign ended, Robert Leakey had single-handedly eliminated 50 confirmed Japanese snipers. 50 of the most dangerous, most highly trained killers in the Pacific Theater. Men who had spent years learning their craft. Men equipped with purpose, built rifles, and military-grade optics. All of them killed by one Marine with a mail-order gun. Conservative military estimates suggest that each Japanese sniper would have killed at least 5 to 8 Americans before being neutralized. That means Leakey saved somewhere between 250 and 400 Marine lives, possibly more, all because he refused to accept that doctrine mattered more than results. This is the story of how one man's crazy idea changed the Pacific War. But first you need to understand just how desperate the situation had become. The Pacific Theater in early 1944 was unlike anything American forces had experienced. The European war had trenches, open fields, identifiable front lines. You could see your enemy, you could call in artillery, you could fight back. The Pacific was different. The jungle was the enemy's ally. Visibility dropped to 30 yards in dense vegetation. Sound traveled strangely through the canopy, making it impossible to locate gunfire. The heat was oppressive, temperatures climbing above 100 degrees with humidity so thick every breath felt like drowning. Insects carried malaria and dengue fever. Snakes hid in the undergrowth. And somewhere in that green hell, Japanese snipers waited. They were masters of their craft. Japanese sniper training lasted over a year. Candidates learned to remain motionless for entire days. They practiced breathing techniques that allowed them to slow their heart rate before a shot. They studied camouflage so thoroughly that they could blend into any environment, becoming indistinguishable from the trees themselves. Their favorite tactic was simple and terrifying. They would climb into the jungle canopy before dawn, often 30 or 40 feet above the ground. They would tie themselves to branches with rope harnesses to prevent falling asleep and tumbling down. They would bring minimal supplies, sometimes just a canteen of water and a few rice balls. And then they would wait. For hours. For days, if necessary. When American patrols passed below, the snipers would pick their targets carefully. Officers first identified by their insignia or map cases. Radio operators second, recognizable by the antenna protruding from their packs. Medics third, marked by the red crosses they wore. One shot. One kill. Then silence. The psychological impact was devastating. Marines began refusing to wear rank insignia. Officers started carrying enlisted rifles instead of their distinctive pistols. Men became paranoid, jumping at every sound, firing wildly into the trees at shadows. Morale collapsed. Units that had fought bravely on other islands became hesitant, afraid to advance, knowing that somewhere above them, death was watching. The standard response was suppressive fire. When a sniper shot, entire squads would open up on the general area, spraying hundreds of rounds into the canopy, hoping to hit something. It almost never worked. Japanese snipers simply waited out the barrage, then continued shooting when the Americans exhausted their ammunition. Artillery was even less effective. Calling in fire support required coordinates, and how do you give coordinates for an enemy you cannot see? By the time rounds landed, the sniper had often relocated to a secondary position. The Marine Corps was losing men at an unsustainable rate, and they had no solution. But moi thu sap thay doi because of one man nobody was paying attention to. Robert Leckie grew up in the Allegheny foothills of rural Pennsylvania during the Great Depression. His family was poor. His father worked odd jobs when he could find them. Meat on the table came from hunting, not from stores. Leckie learned to shoot before he learned to read. His father took him into the mountains as soon as he could walk, teaching him the ways of the forest. How to read wind direction from the sway of branches. How to distinguish between the sound of an animal moving through brush and the sound of wind through leaves. How to sit motionless for hours in a deer stand, waiting for that flicker of movement that meant game was approaching. Most importantly, his father taught him that every bullet had to count. Ammunition cost money they did not have. You could not miss and expect another chance. You had one shot. Make it count. Leckie became exceptional. By the time he was 16, he could hit a target the size of a playing card at 200 yards. By 18, he was known throughout the county as one of the finest shots anyone had ever seen. He understood ballistics instinctively, could calculate wind drift and bullet drop in his head faster than most men could think. But more than marksmanship, Leckie understood patience. Hunting white-tailed deer was not about shooting. It was about waiting. It was about becoming part of the environment. It was about controlling your breathing, your heartbeat, your very presence until you became invisible. The deer would walk within feet of him without sensing danger because Leckie had learned to be nothing, to project no threat, to simply exist as another shadow in the forest. These skills meant everything. When he enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1942, Leckie immediately recognized that his abilities could be useful. He requested a scoped rifle. The request was denied. The Marine Corps did not have a sniper program. Standard doctrine emphasized volume of fire over individual accuracy. The theory was that enough bullets flying downrange would suppress any enemy. Leckie knew this theory was wrong. He had watched Japanese snipers work. He had seen friends die shot through the head by enemies they never saw. He had witnessed entire patrols pinned down for hours by a single rifleman. The standard response was not working. The Marine Corps needed hunters, not just soldiers. But nobody was listening. So Leckie made a decision that his squadmates would later call insane. Using money he had saved from his enlistment bonus, he ordered a commercial hunting scope from a sporting goods catalog back home. A Weaver 330C4 power magnification designed for hunting deer in the Pennsylvania mountains. It cost him nearly 3 months of pay with expedited shipping to a rear echelon supply depot. When the scope finally arrived, Leckie modified his issued Springfield 1903 rifle to accept it. He filed down scrap aluminum to create a makeshift mounting rail. He adjusted the eye relief until it matched his natural shooting position. He zeroed the scope using improvised targets, scratching range markers into tree bark, and calculating his adjustments through trial and error. The modification was completely unauthorized. His rifle now violated every regulation in the Marine Corps manual. His company commander could have ordered him to remove it. His platoon sergeant could have confiscated the scope entirely. His squadmates definitely thought he had lost his mind. They called him Mailbox because his fancy rifle came from the mail. One lance corporal told him straight to his face that he was painting a target on his own back. Japanese snipers would see the scope glint and shoot him first. Another Marine suggested he was playing cowboy. That war was not a hunting trip, that his backwoods skills meant nothing against trained enemy soldiers. The criticism was constant and harsh. Leckie said nothing. He cleaned his rifle every night. He checked the scope alignment obsessively. He practiced range estimation whenever he could. He kept to himself, reading by candlelight, while others played cards, maintaining a distance that some mistook for arrogance, but was actually pure focus. He knew what he needed to do. He just needed the chance to do it. The chance came on March 18, 1944. A Marine patrol moving through a ridgeline sector designated Green 7 came under fire from elevated positions. The first 3 men died in under 30 seconds, shot through the head or throat before they could take cover. The survivors retreated under covering fire, dragging their wounded, completely unable to locate the shooters. A second patrol sent in 2 hours later met the same fate. 1 dead, 2 wounded. No enemy contact beyond the bullets themselves. The company commander was desperate. He needed someone to go in and eliminate the threat directly. Standard tactics were not working. Suppressive fire was useless. Artillery could not be called without risking friendly positions. Leakey volunteered. His platoon sergeant tried to talk him out of it, called it a suicide mission, pointed out that Japanese snipers were trained specialists with years of experience. Leakey was a deer hunter with a mail-order scope. Leakey's response was simple. Someone had to go. He was the only one with the equipment and training for this kind of work. The sergeant reluctantly agreed and assigned him a single spotter, a corporal named Jimmy Voss, who had grown up hunting in Montana. They moved out at dawn, the jungle still shrouded in mist visibility less than 30 yards. What happened next would change everything. Leakey and Voss reached the kill zone by 0700 hours. The bodies of fallen Marines still lay where they had dropped. Nobody had been able to recover them under the sniper's overwatch. Leakey studied the wounds, the angles working backward to estimate firing positions. He found the first sniper in under an hour. A shape human wrapped in camouflage netting nestled in the fork of a banyan tree 20 feet off the ground. The Japanese soldier was looking the other direction, scanning the approach route the previous patrols had used. Leakey exhaled half a breath and squeezed the trigger. The sniper fell, but his shot gave away his position. Within seconds, 2 more rifles cracked from different locations. Bullets snapped inches above his head. Multiple snipers. A coordinated team. Leakey did not panic. He did not spray fire blindly into the trees. He did exactly what he had done 1,000 times in the Pennsylvania mountains. He waited. He watched. He found them. Within 30 minutes, all 3 Japanese snipers were dead. The patrol that had been ambushed for days moved through safely that afternoon. The Marine who had called Leakey's rifle a joke was among them. Nobody laughed anymore. Word spread through the company that night. The mail-order gun worked. The deer hunter was for real. Within a week, Leakey was being assigned to every counter-sniper mission in the sector. But this was only the beginning. Because the Japanese had not deployed 3 snipers on Bougainville. They had deployed hundreds. And somewhere in command headquarters, officers were beginning to notice that their carefully positioned sharpshooters were disappearing one by one. They had no idea what was hunting them. In Part 2, we will see how Robert Leakey's one-man war escalated into something the Japanese had never experienced. How he developed techniques that would later become standard doctrine. How he walked into kill zones that had claimed dozens of Marines and walked out alone, leaving only bodies behind. And how the enemy finally realized that the hunter had become the hunted. In Part 1, you met Robert Leakey, a Pennsylvania deer hunter who brought a mail-order rifle into the deadliest theater of the Pacific War. A man his own squad mates called Suicidal. A nobody who walked into a kill zone that had claimed 6 Marines in 2 days and walked out with 3 confirmed sniper kills. Word spread fast. The mail-order gun worked. The mockery stopped. But here is what nobody tells you about military success. Being right is not enough. Proving yourself is not enough. Sometimes the system itself becomes the enemy. Because while Leakey was eliminating Japanese snipers one by one, there were men in command who wanted him stopped. Not the enemy, his own side. In the weeks following his first mission, Leakey's kill count climbed to 11, then 18, then 23. Each number represented a Marine patrol that moved safely through terrain that had been a death trap. Each number meant lives saved. But each number also meant questions. Questions about unauthorized equipment. questions about modified weapons, questions about a lone Marine operating outside the chain of command. And those questions reached the ears of Lieutenant Colonel Harold Morrison. Morrison was old-school Marine Corps, 22 years of service, veteran of Nicaragua, Haiti, and the early Pacific campaigns. A man who believed that discipline and doctrine won wars, not individual cowboys with hunting rifles. He had built his career on following regulations, and he saw Leakey as a walking violation of everything he stood for. The confrontation came on April 3, 1944. Leakey was summoned to the battalion command post, a structure of sandbags and corrugated metal that served as Morrison's headquarters. He walked in carrying his Springfield the mail order scope still mounted, not knowing what to expect. Morrison was waiting behind a field desk covered in maps and casualty reports. "Private Leakey, do you know why you're here?" "No, sir." Morrison picked up a document. "I have a report that says you've been operating with unauthorized equipment, a civilian scope mounted on a military rifle. Is that true?" "Yes, sir, it is." "And you've been conducting solo missions without proper authorization from battalion command." "I've been doing what my company commander assigned me to do, sir." Morrison's face hardened. "Your company commander doesn't have the authority to create a sniper program. The Marine Corps doesn't have snipers. We have riflemen. We have doctrine. We have regulations." He slammed the document on the desk. "I'm ordering you to remove that scope and return to standard infantry duties, effective immediately." Leakey stood at attention, his jaw tight. 23 kills, dozens of Marines alive because of his work. And this man wanted him to stop because of paperwork. "Sir, with respect, Marines are dying out there. Japanese snipers are killing men every day. I can stop them." "You can follow orders, Private. That's what you can do." The meeting ended with Leakey stripped of his counter-sniper assignments. His rifle was inspected and flagged for modification. He was reassigned to perimeter guard duty, the military equivalent of being put in a corner. For 3 days he watched other patrols leave the wire. He listened to the distant crack of rifle fire. He heard the reports coming back. 2 dead. 3 wounded. Another sniper attack. Another group of Marines caught in a kill zone with no way to fight back. The frustration was unbearable. But Leakey was not alone. Captain William Foster had been watching the situation unfold with growing anger. Foster was Leakey's company commander, the man who had originally looked the other way when the mail order scope arrived. He was also a pragmatist who cared more about results than regulations. Foster had seen the casualty numbers. Before Leakey started hunting, his company lost an average of 4 men per week to sniper fire. After Leakey began operations, that number dropped to less than 1. The math was undeniable. The data was clear. And Foster was not willing to let bureaucracy kill his Marines. He approached Leakey on the evening of April 6th, away from the command post, away from Morrison's ears. "I can't override the colonel directly, but I know someone who might be able to help." Foster explained that division headquarters had been receiving reports about the sniper problem across the entire island. Multiple battalions were suffering the same losses. Command was desperate for solutions, and there were officers at division who might be more open-minded than Morrison. "There's a briefing scheduled for April 10th. All battalion commanders plus division staff. If I can get you in front of them, if you can demonstrate what that rifle can do, we might be able to change some minds." Leakey understood immediately. This was his one chance. "What do I need to do?" Foster laid out the plan. A live demonstration at the division rifle range. Targets set at ranges matching actual combat conditions. Leakey would have exactly 15 minutes to prove that precision marksmanship could solve the sniper problem better than volume fire. 15 minutes to save the program. 15 minutes to justify every modification, every unauthorized mission, every regulation he had broken. If he failed, his rifle would be confiscated. He might face disciplinary action. His counter-sniper work would end permanently. If he succeeded, everything could change. The demonstration was scheduled for 900 hours on April 10th. Leakey spent the next 3 days preparing. He cleaned his rifle until every component gleamed. He checked the scope alignment 100 times. He practiced at unofficial ranges in the jungle, confirming his zero, testing his calculations at various distances. He barely slept. The morning of April 10th arrived gray and humid. Tropical clouds hung low over the island. The division rifle range was a cleared area of packed earth, with target frames set at 100, 200, 300, and 400 yards. 12 officers stood in observation. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison was among them, arms crossed, face skeptical. But there were also 3 colonels from division staff and a brigadier general named Thomas Mitchell, who had flown in specifically to assess the sniper situation. General Mitchell was known as a problem solver, a man who cared about winning more than protocol. Lecky set up his position at the firing line. His Springfield felt heavier than usual. The scope seemed to magnify every imperfection in his technique. He could feel the eyes on his back, the weight of judgment. Captain Foster stood nearby, his expression tense. The range officer called out the exercise. Standard military targets at each distance. 5 shots per distance. Scoring based on accuracy and time. Shooter ready. Lecky chambered a round. Ready. Commence firing. The first target was easy. 100 yards. 5 shots, 5 hits, center mass. The observers made notes but showed no reaction. Any competent rifleman could hit at that range. 200 yards. Lecky adjusted his scope slightly, compensating for the increased drop. 5 shots. 5 hits. Still nothing impressive by military standards. 300 yards. This was where standard marksmanship began to fail. The M1 Garand, the standard Marine rifle, was effective at this range, but required volume fire to ensure hits. Individual accuracy dropped significantly. Lecky took his time, controlled his breathing, squeezed the trigger. 5 shots. 5 hits. All within a 6-inch group. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. 400 yards. This was beyond standard combat range. This was where only exceptional shooters could perform. The target was barely visible to the naked eye, a silhouette the size of a man's torso against the jungle backdrop. Lecky adjusted his scope, calculated the drop, factored in the slight crosswind that had picked up in the last few minutes. First shot. Hit. Second shot. Hit. Third shot. Hit. The observers were leaning forward now. 4th shot. Hit. 5th shot. Lecky exhaled slowly. Squeezed. Hit. The range officer called the results. 20 shots fired. 20 hits. Average group size at 400 yards was under 8 inches. Time elapsed was just over 12 minutes. General Mitchell stepped forward. Private Lecky, how many confirmed kills do you have? 23, sir. Using that rifle, that scope? Yes, sir. Mitchell turned to the assembled officers. His voice carried clearly across the range. Gentlemen, we have been losing an average of 30 Marines per week to enemy sniper fire across this island. 30 men, every week. Our current doctrine has no answer. Our current equipment has no counter. This private with a rifle he modified himself has eliminated 23 enemy snipers in less than a month. He pointed at Lecky's Springfield. I don't care if that scope came from a Sears catalog. I don't care if it violates every regulation in the book. What I care about is results. And this man has delivered results. Mitchell looked directly at Morrison. Colonel, I'm authorizing Private Lecky to continue counter-sniper operations. I'm also requesting that Division Supply obtain additional scoped rifles for selected marksmen in each battalion. We're going to build on what this man has started. Morrison's face was unreadable, but he nodded. Understood, sir. The demonstration was over. Lecky had won. But winning authorization was only the beginning. The real challenge came next. Deployment. General Mitchell's orders were clear. Lecky would continue his solo operations, but he would also be responsible for training other Marines in counter-sniper techniques. Division wanted to replicate his success across the entire island. The problem was, that most Marines had no idea how to think like hunters. They were trained in fire and maneuver, advance under covering fire, suppress enemy positions with volume. The concept of lying motionless for hours waiting for a single shot was completely foreign to their experience. Leakey selected 12 candidates based on their marksmanship scores and temperament. He took them into the jungle for a week of intensive training. He taught them patience, taught them observation, taught them to read the environment the way his father had taught him in the Pennsylvania mountains. 6 of the 12 washed out. They could not handle the psychological pressure of solitary hunting, could not remain still when every instinct screamed to move, could not accept that sometimes the best action was no action at all. But 6 graduated. 6 new counter-snipers equipped with modified rifles and commercial scopes ordered through the same catalog Leakey had used. They were deployed to different sectors, each one assigned to eliminate the sniper threat in their area. The results were immediate and dramatic. In the first week of operations, the 6 new counter-snipers killed 14 Japanese. Combined with Leakey's ongoing work, the total enemy sniper casualties for April exceeded 40 confirmed kills. Marine losses to sniper fire dropped by 60%. Patrols that had been pinned down for days began moving freely. Objectives that had seemed impossible were suddenly achievable. The entire operational tempo of the campaign shifted. And somewhere in the jungle, Japanese commanders were noticing. Their carefully positioned sniper teams were disappearing. Men who had been in place for weeks were simply gone. No radio contact. No reports. Just silence. At first they assumed American artillery had finally gotten lucky. Then they assumed disease or accident. But as the losses mounted, as more and more of their best marksmen vanished without explanation, a different theory emerged. The Americans had hunters of their own. By late April, intercepted communications revealed the Japanese had issued new orders to their sniper teams. Change positions every 12 hours instead of every 3 days. Avoid predictable patterns. Watch for counter-snipers. They were adapting. And they were planning something else. Intelligence reports began filtering back to division headquarters. The Japanese were bringing in reinforcements. Not just regular infantry, specialist units, men trained specifically in counter-counter sniper tactics. The enemy had identified Robert Leakey as a priority threat. They did not know his name, did not know his face, but they knew someone was hunting their hunters, and they were determined to find him. In Part 3, we will see how the Japanese launched their own operation to eliminate the ghost of Bougainville. How Leakey found himself hunted by the very enemy he had been stalking. How the skills that made him deadly would be tested against opponents who matched him shot for shot. And how one miscalculation nearly cost him everything. The hunter was about to become the prey. Let me remind you where we left off. Robert Leakey, a deer hunter from Pennsylvania. A man who brought a mail-order rifle into the Pacific War and proved everyone wrong. In Part 1, you saw him eliminate his first 3 Japanese snipers in a single morning. In Part 2, you watched him fight the military bureaucracy, win authorization from a general, and train 6 new counter-snipers who spread across Bougainville. The results were devastating to the Japanese. 40 confirmed enemy sniper kills in April alone. Marine casualties from sniper fire dropped by 60%. The entire campaign shifted momentum. But success has consequences. By late April 1944, Japanese intelligence had identified a pattern. Their sniper teams were being eliminated at an impossible rate. Someone was hunting them, and Japanese command was determined to find out who. Intercepted communications revealed the enemy's response. They were deploying specialist units, counter-counter snipers. Men trained specifically to track and eliminate whoever was destroying their marksmen. The ghost of Bougainville had become a priority target, and Robert Leakey had no idea they were coming for him. The Japanese reaction was swift and sophisticated. Colonel Takeshi Yamamoto commanded the sniper operations on Bougainville. A veteran of the China campaign with 15 years of experience, Yamamoto had built his reputation on precision warfare. His snipers had killed over 400 Americans in the first 3 months of the campaign. They were his pride, his legacy. Now they were dying. In April alone, Yamamoto lost 43 trained marksmen, men who had spent years perfecting their craft, men who were supposed to be invisible, untouchable, invincible. Gone, one by one, without explanation. The colonel called an emergency meeting on April 28th. His intelligence officers presented the evidence. The American kills were not random. They followed a pattern: systematic sector clearance, precise single shots, no wasted ammunition. Whoever was doing this understood sniper tactics intimately. Yamamoto reached a conclusion that chilled his staff. The Americans had developed their own hunter, someone who thought like a sniper, moved like a sniper, killed like a sniper. His response was immediate. He pulled his remaining snipers back from forward positions. He reorganized them into 2-man teams with overlapping fields of fire. He established new protocols requiring position changes every 8 hours instead of every 3 days. Most importantly, he deployed his own counter-sniper unit, 12 men, hand-selected from the best marksmen in the Japanese army, veterans of campaigns across the Pacific, each one equipped with a Type 97 sniper rifle and a 2.5 times telescope sight. Their mission was simple: find the American hunter, kill him. The hunters became the hunted. But this was not the only problem facing Lecky. Success brought complications. General Mitchell's authorization had opened the door for expanded counter-sniper operations. Division headquarters wanted more trained hunters, more modified rifles, more results. The pressure to scale up was immense, and scaling up was where things began to break down. The commercial scopes Leakey had been ordering were designed for hunting deer, not jungle warfare. The humidity of Bougainville corroded the lens coatings. The constant moisture caused internal fogging. 3 of the 6 new counter-snipers reported scope failures within 2 weeks of deployment. One of them nearly died because of it. Corporal James Mitchell was tracking a Japanese sniper in Sector Yellow on May 2nd. His scope fogged at the worst possible moment. He missed his shot. The enemy sniper did not miss his. Mitchell took a bullet through the shoulder. He survived, but his counter-sniper days were over. Questions began to circulate. Was the program too rushed? Were the modifications too crude? Was Leakey's success just luck that could not be replicated? Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, who had never supported the program, saw an opportunity. He filed a formal complaint with division headquarters, cited equipment failures, cited the wounded corporal, argued that unauthorized modifications were putting Marines at risk, demanded the program be suspended pending proper equipment evaluation. For 3 days, Leakey's counter-snipers were grounded. 3 days of Japanese snipers operating freely. 3 days of Marine casualties climbing back toward pre-April levels. Lecky was furious, frustrated, beginning to doubt himself. And then everything changed. May 8, 1944. The Green Hell. Intelligence reported a concentration of Japanese forces in Sector Green, a 2-mile stretch of jungle that had been impassable for weeks. At least 15 enemy snipers were operating in overlapping positions, creating a kill corridor that no Marine unit could penetrate. But there was more. Reconnaissance indicated this was also the base of operations for Yamamoto's counter-sniper unit. The 12 specialists hunting for Lecky were somewhere in that sector waiting. Division Command saw an opportunity. If Lecky could eliminate the counter-snipers, he would not only clear the sector, but remove the greatest threat to the entire program. It was high risk. It was potentially suicidal. Lecky volunteered immediately. He requested permission to operate alone. No spotter, no backup. Just him, his Springfield, and the mail-order scope that had started everything. Captain Foster tried to talk him out of it, reminded him that the enemy knew someone was hunting them, that they would be watching, that walking into their territory alone was exactly what they wanted. Lecky's response was simple. They're expecting a unit. They're not expecting one man who thinks like them. He moved out at 0400 hours before dawn, the jungle still wrapped in darkness. The first hour was movement only, slow, deliberate. Every step calculated to make no sound. Leakey covered less than 400 yards in 60 minutes, but he covered them invisibly. By 0530 he reached the perimeter of the kill zone. He found a position, a depression in the ground beneath a fallen tree covered in rotting vegetation. He crawled in, arranged his rifle, and became part of the jungle floor. Then he waited. The sun rose, the temperature climbed. Insects crawled across his face, his hands, his neck. He did not move, did not brush them away, did not shift his position. At 0712, he saw movement, 200 yards ahead. A shape in a tree, not a Japanese sniper, a spotter. One of Yamamoto's counter-sniper teams scanning the jungle for exactly the kind of threat Leakey represented. Leakey studied him through the scope. The man was good, patient, disciplined. His camouflage was nearly perfect, nearly. Leakey noted the position and kept scanning. If there was a spotter, there was a shooter nearby. The Japanese used the same two-man teams he had trained his own Marines to use. There, 30 yards from the spotter. Another shape, slightly lower, rifle barrel barely visible through the foliage. The shooter. Leakey calculated. 2 targets, 200 yards. If he killed the shooter first, the spotter would flee. If he killed the spotter first, the shooter would fire on his muzzle flash. He needed both. Within seconds of each other. Leakey made his decision. He adjusted his aim to the shooter. Exhaled, squeezed. The rifle cracked. The shooter slumped. Leakey worked the bolt, shifted aim. The spotter was already moving, reaching for his own rifle. Too slow. Leakey fired again. The spotter fell from the tree, crashing through branches. 2 down, within 4 seconds. But the shots had announced his presence. Somewhere in the green hell, 10 more counter-snipers now knew he was here. Leakey moved. He abandoned his position immediately, crawling through the undergrowth, putting distance between himself and the muzzle flash location. He found a new position 50 yards away. A different angle. Different cover. He waited again. At 0803, gunfire erupted to his left. 3 shots. Then silence. The enemy was searching, firing at suspected positions, trying to flush him out. Leakey did not move. At 0847, he spotted another target. A lone sniper repositioning through the undergrowth, moving too quickly, making too much noise. Overconfident or scared. Either way, dead. Leakey fired. 3 down. The morning continued. By noon, Leakey had confirmed 5 kills. 5 of Yamamoto's 12 specialists. But the remaining 7 had gone to ground. They knew approximately where he was. They were waiting for him to make a mistake. Leakey decided to give them one. He deliberately exposed himself, just for a moment. A flash of movement in the undergrowth that any trained sniper would notice. Then he dropped flat and crawled rapidly to a pre-selected position 20 yards away. The trap worked. Within seconds, 2 shots cracked from different positions. Bullets tore through the space where he had been. Muzzle flashes marked the shooters. Leakey was already aiming. First shot, 1 shooter down. Second shot, miss. The second shooter had moved. Leakey relocated again. The jungle was chaos now. Gunfire, shouting in Japanese. The enemy was panicking, discipline breaking down. By 1430 hours, it was over. 9 confirmed kills. 9 of Yamamoto's 12 counter-snipers eliminated in a single day. The remaining 3 had fled the sector entirely, abandoning their positions. But Leakey was not finished. He spent the next 4 hours methodically clearing the regular snipers in the green hell. Moving from position to position. Hunting the hunters. By nightfall, his total count for the day reached 1515 Japanese snipers in 12 hours. He walked out of the green hell at 1900 hours, rifle slung across his back, uniform soaked with sweat and covered in mud. A Marine patrol met him at the perimeter. They stared at him like he was a ghost. In a way, he was. News of the Green Hell spread across the island within hours. General Mitchell personally called Captain Foster to confirm the reports. 15 kills in one day. 9 of them specialist counter-snipers. A single Marine with the mail-order rifle had destroyed an entire enemy unit designed specifically to stop him. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's complaint was quietly filed away. The equipment evaluation was canceled. The counter-sniper program resumed immediately. But the impact went far beyond Bougainville. Reports reached Pacific Fleet headquarters in Hawaii. Then Washington. The story of the Pennsylvania deer hunter who had killed over 40 Japanese snipers became legend among military planners. Within weeks, the Marine Corps began developing its first formal sniper doctrine. Equipment requisitions went out for proper military scopes. Training programs were drafted based on the techniques Leckie had developed. The improvised, unauthorized program that Morrison had tried to shut down was becoming official policy. The numbers told the story. Before Leckie's counter-sniper operations began, Marine units on Bougainville suffered an average of 30 sniper-related casualties per week. By the end of May, that number had dropped to 7, a reduction of over 75%. Japanese sniper effectiveness collapsed entirely. Yamamoto's remaining marksmen were demoralized, terrified of operating in areas where the American hunter might be present. Many refused forward deployment. Some deserted their positions entirely. The psychological impact was as significant as the physical. Intercepted communications revealed Japanese soldiers referring to an invisible enemy who killed without warning. They called him the Ghost and the Demon. They did not know his name, his rank, or even that he was a single person. They only knew that their snipers kept dying. By June, Japanese command on Bougainville had effectively abandoned sniper operations. The kill corridor that had paralyzed American advances for months simply ceased to exist. Patrols moved freely through territory that had been death traps. Objectives fell that had seemed impossible just weeks before. Robert Leakey's final confirmed count reached 50 Japanese snipers killed. 50 men, 50 threats eliminated. By conservative military estimates, each of those snipers would have killed 5 to 8 Americans. That meant Leakey had saved between 250 and 400 Marine lives. With a mail-order gun, he received no medal, no formal recognition. The Marine Corps still did not officially have snipers, so there was no category to honor what he had done. But his fellow Marines knew. They stopped calling him Mailbox. They stopped joking about his rifle. When Leckey walked through camp, men nodded respectfully, silently, the way you acknowledge someone who has done something you cannot fully comprehend. The Bougainville campaign ended in August 1944. The island was secured. The Japanese threat neutralized. Leakey was reassigned to another theater, another battle, another chapter of the war that would test him in different ways. But what happened to the man behind the legend? What did Robert Leakey do after the war ended? And why did history almost forget him entirely? In Part 4, we will follow Leakey through the final battles of the Pacific, through the brutal fighting at Peleliu, through the end of the war, and his return home to Pennsylvania. We will discover what became of his famous rifle. We will learn why the Marine Corps tried to bury his story, and we will understand the true legacy of the man they called Suicidal. This story has one more chapter, the chapter that almost no one knows. Let me take you back to the beginning. A deer hunter from Pennsylvania. A mail-order rifle scope that cost 3 months of military pay. A man his own squadmates called Suicidal. Robert Leakey walked into the jungles of Bougainville carrying a weapon everyone mocked. He walked out having killed 50 Japanese snipers. He saved between 250 and 400 Marine lives by conservative military estimates. He pioneered techniques that would become the foundation of modern sniper doctrine. In Part 1, you watched him prove the doubters wrong with his first 3 kills. In Part 2, you saw him battle military bureaucracy and win authorization from a general. In Part 3, you witnessed his greatest triumph, the clearing of the Green Hell, 15 enemy snipers eliminated in a single day. But there is one question we have not answered. What happened to Robert Leckie after the guns fell silent? The answer is more complicated than you might expect. Because sometimes heroes do not get parades. Sometimes the men who change history disappear back into ordinary lives. Sometimes the system that a man saved decides it would rather forget he ever existed. This is the final chapter of a story that almost vanished from history. The Bougainville campaign ended in August 1944. The island was secured. Robert Leckie's counter-sniper operations had been so successful that Japanese forces essentially abandoned their sniper program in that theater. Marine patrols moved freely through terrain that had been death traps just months before. But the war was not over. Leckie was reassigned to the 1st Marine Division in preparation for one of the bloodiest battles in Pacific history. Peleliu. The fighting there was nothing like Bougainville. There were no jungle canopies to hide in, no patients stalking through dense vegetation. Peleliu was coral rock and limestone caves. Close quarters, combat. Room to room. Cave to cave. The Japanese had fortified the island with over 500 caves and tunnels, transforming it into a honeycomb of death. Leckie carried his Springfield through Peleliu. The same rifle. The same mail-order scope. But there was no opportunity for the kind of precision hunting that had defined his work on Bougainville. The fighting was too close, too chaotic, too brutal. He survived. Many did not. The 1st Marine Division suffered over 6,500 casualties at Peleliu. Nearly 40% of the men who landed on those beaches were killed or wounded. It was one of the highest casualty rates of any American amphibious assault in the entire war. Leckie came through physically intact, but changed in ways that would not become apparent until years later. When the war finally ended in August 1945, Robert Leckie returned home to Pennsylvania. He did not receive a hero's welcome. There were no newspaper interviews, no medal ceremonies, no official recognition of what he had accomplished on Bougainville. The Marine Corps still did not formally acknowledge snipers as a military specialty. As far as the official record was concerned, Leckie was just another rifleman who served his time and came home. He took a job at a lumber mill in the same town where he had grown up. The work was hard, physical, exhausting. He liked it that way. It kept his mind occupied. It kept the memories at a distance. He married a local woman named Eleanor, a quiet schoolteacher, who understood that some things did not need to be discussed. They bought a small house on the edge of the Allegheny foothills, not far from the mountains where his father had taught him to hunt. He never hunted again. The rifle that had killed 50 Japanese snipers stayed in a case in the attic. The mail-order scope that had started everything gathered dust. Leckie never mounted it on another weapon, never looked through it, never spoke about what it had done. His neighbors knew he had served in the Pacific. They did not know anything else. He attended church on Sundays. He worked at the mill during the week. He raised 2 children who grew up knowing their father had been a Marine, but nothing more specific than that. The nightmares came and went. Some weeks were better than others. Eleanor learned to recognize the signs, the restlessness before sleep, the sudden waking at small sounds, the distant look that sometimes crossed his face when he thought no one was watching. She never pushed him to talk about it. Once in the late 1960s, a local veterans organization asked Leckie to speak at a Memorial Day ceremony. They wanted him to share his experiences with younger generations. He declined politely, said he was not much of a public speaker, said there were other men who had done more than him. That was the closest he ever came to acknowledging what he had accomplished. But the legacy Robert Leckie left behind did not require his participation. It grew without him. The techniques he pioneered on Bougainville did not disappear when he came home. They spread through the Marine Corps like ripples in water. The officers who had witnessed his success carried those lessons to new commands. The men he had trained became instructors themselves. The concepts of patience concealment and precision marksmanship that Leckie had brought from Pennsylvania deer hunting became foundational elements of military doctrine. In 1943, the Marine Corps had no formal sniper program. By 1966, they had established the Scout Sniper School at Camp Pendleton, one of the most elite training programs in the world. The curriculum included everything Leakey had taught himself: range estimation, wind drift calculation, breath control, the psychology of waiting, the art of becoming invisible. Graduates of that school fought in Vietnam, where American snipers achieved confirmed kill ratios that exceeded anything seen in previous conflicts. They fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, where precision marksmanship saved countless lives by eliminating threats without collateral damage. They continue to serve today, using equipment that would seem miraculous to the man who started it all with a catalog scope. The numbers tell the story. During World War II, American snipers had no standardized training, no dedicated equipment, no official doctrine. Kill ratios varied wildly. Effectiveness was inconsistent. By Vietnam, Marine Scout snipers were achieving confirmed kill ratios of over 90%. One shot, one kill became more than a motto. It became reality. By the modern era, American military snipers have saved an estimated tens of thousands of lives through precision engagement that eliminated threats while minimizing civilian casualties. All of it traces back to men like Robert Leakey. Men who saw a problem the system could not solve and found their own solutions. Men who proved that individual initiative could change the course of history. The Springfield 1903 rifle that Leakey carried became a legend in its own right. The basic design influenced sniper rifle development for decades. The concept of mounting precision optics on infantry weapons, which seemed so radical in 1944, became standard practice across every modern military. Today, a United States Marine sniper carries equipment worth over $30,000. Rifles engineered to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Scopes with computerized range finding and environmental compensation. Ammunition manufactured to specifications that would have seemed impossible in Leakey's era. But the fundamental principles remain identical. Find your target. Control your breathing. Wait for the perfect moment. Make the shot count. Robert Leakey learned those principles hunting deer in Pennsylvania during the Great Depression. He applied them to save Marine lives on Bougainville. And through the generations of snipers who followed, he continues to save lives today. But there is a lesson here that goes beyond military history. Robert Leakey was not a military genius. He was not a decorated officer or a graduate of prestigious academies. He was a deer hunter with an idea that everyone told him was crazy. His own squad mates mocked him. His platoon sergeant called him suicidal. A lieutenant colonel tried to shut down his program. The entire military bureaucracy was designed to reject exactly the kind of individual initiative he represented. And yet he succeeded. Not because he was special, but because he refused to accept that doctrine mattered more than results. Because he was willing to spend his own money, risk his own reputation, and face ridicule, rather than watch his fellow Marines die from a problem he knew how to solve. History is filled with similar stories. Billy Mitchell was court-martialed in 1925 for advocating air power when the military establishment believed in battleships. He was proven right at Pearl Harbor. Hyman Rickover was nearly forced out of the Navy for pushing nuclear submarine technology when the establishment thought it was impossible. He built the fleet that won the Cold War. John Boyd was ostracized by the Air Force for developing fighter tactics that contradicted official doctrine. His ideas revolutionized air combat worldwide. The pattern repeats endlessly. Individual insight versus institutional inertia. Practical solutions versus procedural objections. Results versus regulations. Leakey fits perfectly into this tradition. A man who saw what needed to be done and did it regardless of what the system said. The lesson applies far beyond military history. Every organization, every institution, every system develops blind spots. Problems that the official channels cannot solve because acknowledging them would require admitting the existing approach is flawed. Progress almost always requires someone willing to work outside the system to take risks, The bureaucracy will not authorize to prove through results what could never be approved through channels. This is as true in business as it is in war, as true in science as it is in government, as true today as it was in 1944. The question is not whether such problems exist. They always do. The question is whether there will be people brave enough and stubborn enough to solve them anyway. Robert Leckie was one of those people. And there is one final detail about his story that almost no one knows. When Leckie passed away in 1987, his widow Eleanor donated his possessions to a local veterans organization as he had requested. Among those possessions was the Springfield rifle with the mail-order scope still mounted. The organization did not know what they had. They saw an old rifle with a scratched civilian scope, nothing special, nothing valuable. They passed it along to a small military museum in rural Pennsylvania, where it sat in a display case for years, identified only as a Springfield 1903, with commercial scope used in the Pacific Theater. No plaque explained its history. No sign mentioned the 50 Japanese snipers it had killed. No indication that this anonymous weapon had pioneered techniques that would save countless lives across generations. In 2003, a military historian named David Chen was researching early sniper operations in the Pacific. He found scattered references in after-action reports to an unnamed Marine with exceptional marksmanship on Bougainville. References to a scope rifle that was not standard issue. References to kill counts that seemed impossible for a single shooter. Chen spent 3 years tracking down the story. He interviewed surviving veterans of the Bougainville campaign. He found Leckie's widow still living in the same Pennsylvania town. He pieced together the evidence from fragments scattered across military archives, personal letters, and fading memories. His research led him to that small museum in Pennsylvania. When he saw the rifle in its dusty display case, Chen immediately recognized what it was. The improvised mounting rail filed from scrap aluminum. The Weaver. 330C scope, the same model available from sporting goods catalogs in the early 1940s. The wear patterns on the stock from countless hours of jungle crawling. He was holding the weapon that had changed the Pacific War. Today that rifle has a proper display. A plaque explains its history. Visitors can read about Robert Leckie and the 50 Japanese snipers he eliminated. The mail-order scope that was mocked as suicidal is now recognized as a piece of military history. But for decades, it sat anonymous and forgotten, just like the man who carried it. Let me leave you with this, from a deer hunter in Pennsylvania to a legend that almost vanished from history. Robert Leckie never asked for recognition, never sought fame, never wrote memoirs or gave interviews. He simply saw a problem, developed a solution, and implemented it despite every obstacle the system threw in his way. 50 Japanese snipers killed. Between 250 and 400 Marine lives saved. Techniques that evolved into doctrine used by every modern military on Earth. A legacy that continues saving lives 80 years later. All from one man with a mail-order gun. The next time someone tells you that your idea is crazy, that it violates procedure, that it cannot possibly work, remember Robert Leckie. Remember that he was called suicidal by his own squad mates. Remember that a lieutenant colonel tried to shut him down. Remember that the entire military bureaucracy was designed to reject exactly what he was doing. And remember that he proved them all wrong. Not through argument, not through politics, not through connections or credentials. Through results. That is the power of refusing to accept that the system knows best. That is the legacy of one man who decided that saving lives mattered more than following rules. If you know another story like this, a forgotten hero, a crazy idea that changed history, share it in the comments below. These stories deserve to be remembered. And if you want to discover more hidden chapters of military history, subscribe. Because Robert Leckie was not alone. World War II was filled with ordinary people who did extraordinary things, and most of their stories have never been told. One final thought. Somewhere in Pennsylvania there is a small house on the edge of the Allegheny foothills. A quiet place where a deer hunter once lived with his wife and raised his children and never spoke about the war. He is gone now. Eleanor is gone. The children have grown old themselves. But in a museum not far away, a rifle sits in a glass case. Scratched stock, worn barrel. A civilian scope that cost 3 months of military pay. 50 kills. Hundreds of lives saved. A legacy that spans generations. They called him Suicidal. History calls him a pioneer. And his mail-order gun proved them all wrong.